Hey there, have you ever had a neighbor who acted like they were the king or queen of the whole world? Like they could boss everyone around and make all the rules? Well, get ready, because this story is going to blow your mind. It's packed with surprises, sneaky secrets, and a twist that'll make your jaw drop. Before we jump in, I've got a quick favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from today. Are you at home, at school, or maybe sneaking a peek on your phone? Oh, and if you love wild stories about crazy neighbors, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the fun. Ready? Let's dive into the action. Picture this, it's a bright, sunny Saturday morning in a place called Oakwood Heights. This is one of those neighborhoods where the houses are neat, the lawns are green, and everybody seems to know what everybody else is up to. Kids ride bikes down the street, dogs bark at squirrels, and neighbors wave to each other over picket fences. It's the kind of place where nothing too exciting happens, or at least that's what everyone thought. But oh boy, were they in for a surprise. Now let me introduce you to the star of our story, Jake Turner. Jake was the new guy in Oakwood Heights. He moved into a small house at the end of the street just a few months ago, and he was the kind of person who didn't make a big fuss. He was tall, with messy brown hair and a friendly smile that made you feel like you'd known him forever. Every day, Jake would be out in his driveway, working on this fancy electric gate he was building for his fence. It was all shiny and high-tech, with buttons and motors that made it slide open and shut with a quiet hum. Jake loved tinkering with it, tightening bolts, testing wires, and making sure it worked just right. To most of the neighbors, Jake was just a regular guy. They'd see him out there with his toolbox, wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans, and they'd think, oh, that's just Jake, the new guy who likes to fix stuff. Kids would wave as they zoomed by on their scooters, and old Mr. Jenkins next door would nod and say, "Nice day, Jake." Jake would wave back, always polite, always calm. But here's the thing nobody knew. Jake wasn't just a regular guy. Nope, he had a secret. A big, juicy secret that was going to shake up Oakwood Heights like a thunderstorm on a sunny day. And that secret, it was about to turn the tables on the nosiest, bossiest neighbor in the whole neighborhood. Before we get to that, let's talk about what makes this story so fun. Have you ever met someone who judged you before they even got to know you? Maybe they looked at you and decided you were too quiet, too loud, too short, or too tall without even asking your name. It's the worst, right? Well, that's exactly what's happening to Jake. The people in Oakwood Heights thought they had him all figured out. He's just the new guy, they'd whisper. He's nobody special. But oh, they were so wrong. And the person who was the most wrong, her name was Karen Mitchell, and she was about to learn that judging Jake was the biggest mistake she ever made. Here's a question for you to think about. Have you ever been underestimated? Like someone thought you couldn't do something, but you proved them wrong. Maybe you scored a goal in soccer when nobody thought you could, or you aced a test everyone said was too hard. Stick around, because Jake, about to show everyone in Oakwood Heights that he's not who they think he is. He's going to flip the script in the most epic way possible, and you're not going to want to miss it. Let's set the scene a little more so you can really picture it. Oakwood Heights wasn't just any neighborhood, it was the kind of place where people loved to follow rules. There was this group called the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short, that made sure everything looked perfect. The HOA had rules for everything. Your grass couldn't be too long, your mailbox had to be just the right color. Even your garbage cans had to be hidden away so they did ruin the view. Most folks didn't mind the rules too much, but there was one person who loved them more than anything, Karen Mitchell. Karen was the president of the HOA, and she took her job very seriously. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard that she carried everywhere like it was her best friend. If you broke even the tiniest rule, Karen would know about it. She'd march right up to your door with a frown and say, "Your dog barked too loud yesterday. That's against the rules." Or, "Your flowers are the wrong shade of red. Fix it." Neighbors called her HOA Karen behind her back because she was always sticking her nose in everyone's business. Now Jake's electric gate. That was like a big red flag to Karen. The moment she saw it, she decided it didn't belong in Oakwood Heights. It's too modern, she'd complain. It's too loud, it's too everything. She'd stand on the sidewalk, scribbling notes on her clipboard, muttering about how Jake was breaking all sorts of HOA rules. The other neighbors would watch from their windows, whispering to each other. Poor Jake, they'd say. He's no match for Karen. She's going to make his life miserable. But Jake, he didn't seem worried at all. Every time Karen stomped over to yell about his gate, he'd just smile and say, "Okay, Karen, I'll look into it." Then he'd go right back to working on his gate like nothing was wrong. The neighbors thought he was crazy. Why wasn't he arguing? Why wasn't he fighting back? Didn't he know Karen could fine him or even make him tear the gate down? What they didn't realize was that Jake wasn't scared of Karen, not one bit. He was playing a game, a very smart game, and Karen was about to fall right into his trap. Let's zoom in on Jake for a second because he's the key to this whole story. To everyone else, he looked like a guy who didn't have much going on. His house was small, his truck was old, and he didn't talk much about himself. When people asked what he did for a living, he'd just shrug and say, "Oh, I fix things." Nobody thought to ask more questions. They saw his toolbox and his gate and figured he was just a handyman. But there was something about Jake that didn't quite add up. Like the way he always seemed to know what was going on in the neighborhood, even though he kept to himself. Or the way his eyes would light up just a tiny bit when Karen started yelling like he was holding back a laugh. Here's a little hint about Jake's secret. He wasn't in Oakwood Heights by accident. Nope, he was there for a reason, a big reason, and that electric gate everyone thought was just a hobby. It was part of his plan. Every bolt he tightened, every wire he connected was leading up to something huge. Something that would make Karen wish she'd never messed with him. But what was it? What was Jake hiding? And why was he so calm when everyone else would have been freaking out? Let's paint one more picture before we move on. Imagine you're standing in Oakwood Heights, right there on Jake's street. The sun is shining, birds are chirping, and Jake's out in his driveway, his gate gleaming in the light. Across the street, Karen's watching from her porch, her clipboard clutched tight. Neighbors are peeking out their windows, waiting to see what happens next. The air feels thick, like something big is about to go down. And Jake, he's just whistling like he doesn't have a care in the world. But deep down, he knows the truth. This quiet little neighborhood is about to get a wake-up call, and he's the one who's going to deliver it. So what do you think Jake's secret is? Got any guesses? Maybe he's a superhero in disguise, or maybe he's got a trick up his sleeve that's going to turn Karen's world upside down. One thing's for sure, this story's just getting started, and it's going to get crazier from here. Stick with me because Jake, about to show everyone in Oakwood Heights that he's not the guy they thought he was, and when he does, it's going to be epic. Hey, quick reminder, don't forget to comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you're loving this story, hit that subscribe button for more. Let's keep the fun going. Okay, let's dive into the juicy part of this story where things start to heat up. You've met Jake Turner, the quiet guy with the cool electric gate, but now it's time to meet the person who's making his life super tricky. Her name is Karen Mitchell, and oh boy, does she love being in charge. Karen was the president of the Homeowners Association, or HOA, in Oakwood Heights, and she acted like she owned every house, every lawn, and every mailbox in the whole neighborhood. Get ready, because this is where the drama really kicks off, and it's going to keep you glued to the story. So picture Oakwood Heights again. It's a sunny place with neat houses, kids playing in the street, and flowers blooming everywhere. Everything looks perfect, right? Well, that's because Karen made sure it stayed that way. She was like a hawk, always watching for anyone who broke even the tiniest rule. If your grass grew a little too long, like 2 inches too long, she'd march over and slap you with a fine. If your mailbox was leaning just a tiny bit to the side, you'd find a mean letter taped to your door. And don't even think about leaving your bike on the driveway. Karen would write you up faster than you can say oops. Karen was tall, with a loud voice and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She always carried a clipboard and she'd scribble notes on it like her life depended on it. Neighbors were scared of her. If Karen was mad, you'd know it because her voice could wake up the whole street. People called her HOA Karen when she wasn't around because she was always telling everyone what to do. Paint your fence, she'd yell. Move your trash can, she'd snap. Nobody wanted to get on her bad side, so they all tried to follow her rules. Now let's talk about Jake's electric gate, because that's where the real trouble started. Jake's gate was shiny and fancy, with buttons that made it slide open and shut all by itself. He built it himself, and he was super proud of it. He'd spend hours in his driveway tightening bolts and testing wires, making sure it worked perfectly. The kids in the neighborhood thought it was awesome. They'd ride by on their bikes and yell, "Cool gate, Jake." But Karen, oh, she hated that gate. To her, it was like a big flashing sign that said, "Trouble." The first time Karen saw the gate, her eyes got narrow and her lips got all tight. She stomped right up to Jake's driveway, her clipboard clutched in her hands. "Turner," she barked, pointing at the gate like it was a monster. "What is that thing? It's an eyesore. It's against HOA rules and I'm reporting you." Her voice was so loud it bounced off the houses. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, holding their breath. They figured Jake was in big trouble now. Nobody argued with Karen and got away with it. But here's the thing about Jake, he didn't act scared at all. While Karen was yelling and waving hair narcissist, Jake just stood there, calm as could be. He looked at Karen, gave her a little nod and said, "All good, Karen, I'll handle it." Then he went right back to working on his gate, tightening a bolt like nothing was wrong. Karen huffed and puffed, her face turning red, but Jake didn't even blink. He just kept smiling like he knew something she didn't. The neighbors couldn't believe it. They whispered to each other behind their fences. "Jake's crazy," they said. "He's going to lose this fight. Karen always wins." They thought Jake was in way over his head like a mouse trying to fight a cat. Everyone knew Karen could make his life miserable. She could fine him, send him nasty letters, or even make him tear down his gate. But Jake, he wasn't worried, not one bit. Behind those calm eyes, he was watching everything, waiting for the perfect moment. And Karen, she had no idea what was coming. This wasn't the end of it, though. Karen didn't give up that easily. The next day she was back, louder than ever. She stood in Jake's driveway, shouting about how his gate was ruining the neighborhood. She said it was too big, too shiny, too noisy, anything she could think of. "I'm warning you, Turner," she yelled. "Take it down or you'll be sorry." Jake just shrugged and said, "Got it, Karen, I'll look into it." Then he picked up his wrench and kept working like she wasn't even there. The neighbors watched it all, their eyes wide. Some of them felt bad for Jake. "Poor guy," they said. "He's so nice, but he doesn't stand a chance." Others thought he was asking for trouble. "Why doesn't he just follow the rules?" they muttered. "Karen's going to crush him." But Jake didn't seem to care what anyone thought. He'd wave to the kids riding by, joke with old Mr. Jenkins next door, and keep fixing his gate. Every time Karen yelled, he'd give her that same calm smile, like he was playing a game only he understood. Karen started getting even bossier. She didn't just yell, she started writing Jake letters. Every few days he'd find a new one in his mailbox, full of big words like violation and non-compliance. The letters said his gate was against HOA rules and he had to take it down or pay a huge fine. Karen even called an HOA meeting just to talk about Jake's gate. She stood up in front of everyone, waving her clipboard, and said, "This is about keeping our neighborhood perfect. We can't let people like Jake Turner break the rules." The neighbors nodded, too scared to argue. But Jake, he didn't even go to the meeting. He stayed home, working on his gate, whistling a little tune. By now, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Kids would ride by Jake's house just to see what was happening. Parents would gossip over coffee, saying things like, "Karen's going to win this one," or "Jake going to regret moving here." Even the dog seemed to bark louder when Karen was around, but Jake kept doing his thing. He'd tighten a screw, test the gate's motor, and write something in a little black book he carried in his pocket. Nobody knew what he was writing, but he'd smile every time he did it, like he was keeping score. Here's something funny. The more Karen yelled, the calmer Jake got. It was like her shouting made him stronger, not weaker. One day, she screamed so loud that even the birds stopped chirping. "You're making a fool of yourself, Turner," she shouted. "Everyone agrees with me, that gate's got to go." Jake looked up, wiped his hands on a rag, and said, "Sure thing, Karen, I hear you." Then he went back to work, like she was just a noisy bug buzzing around. The neighbors started to wonder. Why was Jake fighting back? Why didn't he yell or argue? Some thought he was scared, but others weren't so sure. There was something about the way Jake moved, the way he watched Karen, that made them think twice. He wasn't acting like someone who was losing. He was acting like someone who knew he was going to win. But how? What did he have up his sleeve? Nobody could figure it out, and that made them watch even closer. Karen, though, didn't notice any of this. She was too busy being mad. She thought she had Jake right where she wanted him. She'd tell anyone who'd listen, "He's nobody, just a new guy who doesn't know his place." She was so sure she was in charge, she didn't see the trap Jake was setting. Every time she yelled, every letter she wrote, every rule she threw at him, it was all part of something bigger, something Jake was ready for. So what do you think? Is Jake really as calm as he seems, or is he hiding something huge? Maybe he's got a plan to turn the tables on Karen, or maybe he's just really good at staying cool. One thing's for sure, this fight is far from over, and Oakwood Heights is about to see something they'll never forget. Weeks went by in Oakwood Heights, and Karen Mitchell got louder and meaner every day. She was like a storm cloud that wouldn't go away, always hanging over Jake Turner's house. Karen was obsessed with Jake's electric gate. She thought it was the worst thing ever, and she wasn't going to let it stay. She'd march up and down the street, snapping pictures of the gate with her phone, scribbling angry notes on her clipboard, and muttering about how Jake was a troublemaker. She even called special HOA meetings just to complain about him. "That gate has got to go," she'd yell, pointing her pen like it was a sword. "Jake Turner is ruining our perfect neighborhood." One day, Karen went way too far. She stood right outside Jake's house, shouting so loud the whole street could hear. "This gate is making our houses worth less money," she screamed. "It's ugly, it's noisy, and it's against the rules." Neighbors peeked out their windows, watching her wave her arms like a wild bird. Some nodded along, too scared to disagree with her. Others just stayed quiet, but they all thought the same thing. Jake was in big trouble now. Nobody wanted to mess with Karen when she was this mad. But Jake, he didn't seem to care. He kept working on his gate like nothing was wrong. He'd twist a screw, check the motor, and make the gate slide open and shut with a soft hum. Every now and then he'd look up at Karen, and his eyes had this spark, like he was saying, "Go ahead, keep talking." He wasn't yelling back or getting mad. He was calm, and that made everyone wonder what was going on in his head. Here's something nobody noticed. Jake had a tiny camera hidden on his fence post. It was so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking hard. That camera was watching everything Karen did, every shout, every picture she took, every time she shook her clipboard. It recorded it all, quiet as a mouse. Jake also had this little black book in his pocket. Whenever Karen left, he'd pull it out and write something down, smiling just a bit. What was he writing? Nobody knew, but it was like he was keeping a secret score. Another weird thing. Jake kept having these random talks with delivery drivers. You know, the guys who drop off packages or bring pizza. They'd stop by and Jake would chat with them for a minute, nothing big, just a few words. But if you looked close, those chats seemed strange, like they weren't just about pizza or mail. Jake would nod, say something quick, and the drivers would nod back like they shared a secret. Neighbors didn't think much of it. They just thought Jake was friendly. But was that all it was? One evening, Karen came back madder than ever. She stormed up to Jake's driveway, her face red as a tomato. "I've had it, Turner," she yelled. "I'm calling the cops. That gate coming down and you can't stop me." Her voice was so loud, dogs started barking down the street. Neighbors stepped onto their porches, eyes wide, waiting to see what Jake would do. They figured he'd finally snap. I mean, who would? Karen was threatening to bring the police. But Jake, he just shrugged. "Go for it," he said, his voice as steady as a rock. Then he picked up his wrench and kept working like Karen was just a noisy fly buzzing around. The neighbors gasped. Was Jake crazy? Why wasn't he fighting back? Why wasn't he begging her to stop? They whispered to each other, confused. "He's going to lose everything," one said. "Karen's too powerful," said another. But Jake didn't look worried, not even a little. So what do you think Jake's hiding? Got any guesses? Is he just super chill, or does he have a big plan up his sleeve? One thing's for sure, things are about to get wild in Oakwood Heights, and you're not going to want to miss it. The sun was shining bright the next morning in Oakwood Heights, and Karen Mitchell was ready to make trouble. She stood right in front of Jake Turner's house, holding her phone like it was a prize. She was so mad about Jake's electric gate, she decided to call the cops. "Yes, officer," she shouted into the phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "There's an illegal gate at 24 Oakwood Drive. It's dangerous and it needs to go." She glared at Jake, her eyes like lasers, thinking she'd finally won. She waved her phone around like it was a trophy, a big smirk on her face. Jake was leaning against his gate, his arms crossed, looking calm as ever. But if you looked close, you could see a tiny smile on his face, like he was holding back a laugh. He didn't say a word, just watched Karen make her big scene. Neighbors started peeking out their doors, wondering what was going to happen. They thought Jake was in huge trouble now. Karen had called the police. Nobody could beat that, right? A few minutes later, a police car rolled up the street, its lights flashing. Karen's smirk got even bigger. She crossed her arms, thinking, this is it. Jake's gate is done for. But then something weird happened. 2 more police cars pulled up behind the first one. 3 cars. That was a lot for just a gate, wasn't it? Neighbors stepped onto their lawns, whispering to each other what was going on. 3 officers got out of the cars, looking serious. Karen pointed at Jake, ready to tell them all about his awful gate, but the officers didn't even glance at Jake. Instead, they walked straight toward Karen. Her smirk disappeared and her eyes got wide. "Karen Mitchell," one officer said, holding up a big folder. His voice was firm, like he meant business. Karen's face froze like she'd seen a ghost. "We need to talk," the officer went on. "We've got reports that you've been taking HOA money. Thousands of dollars are missing. Can you explain that?" The neighbors gasped so loud it was like a big gust of wind. They crowded closer, standing on the sidewalk, their mouths open. Karen's face turned red, then white. She stammered, What? No, this is about his gate." She pointed at Jake, her hand shaking, but the officer shook his head. "Ma'am, we're not here for the gate. We're here for you, and we've got evidence, thanks to Mr. Turner." Every head turned to Jake. He stepped forward, cool as a breeze, holding his little black book in one hand and a tiny USB drive in the other. "I've been keeping track," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Karen's been charging people fines for years, but that money never went to the HOA. My camera saw where it really went, her new car, her fancy trips to the beach, all of it." He held up the USB drive and the crowd went quiet. "It's all here," he said, "every penny she took." Karen's jaw dropped so far it looked like it might hit the ground. She tried to talk, but all that came out was a squeak. The neighbors started buzzing, their whispers turning into loud chatter. "She stole money," one said. "From us," said another. Kids on their bikes stopped riding to listen. Even the dogs stopped barking like they knew something huge was happening. Then came the biggest shock of all. Jake looked at the crowd and said, "I'm not just the new guy, I'm a private investigator. The HOA hired me to find out who was stealing their money. And Karen, she walked right into my trap." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. Jake wasn't just some guy with a toolbox, he was a detective. The neighbors couldn't believe it. The guy they thought was nobody special had been watching Karen all along, collecting proof, waiting for the perfect moment. And now, here it was, Karen's worst day ever, all because she picked a fight with the wrong person. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and fell to the ground. The officers stepped closer, their faces serious. Jake just stood there, his gate gleaming behind him like it was smiling too. Oakwood Heights would never be the same after this day. The street in Oakwood Heights was buzzing like a beehive. Karen Mitchell stood there, her face red and her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The police officers had just put handcuffs on her wrists and she was trying to argue, but nothing she said made sense. "This is a mistake," she sputtered, but the officers didn't listen. They led her toward their car and the neighbors couldn't stop staring. Everyone was shocked, but they were also excited. Something big had just happened, and it felt like the whole neighborhood was waking up from a bad dream. Jake Turner stood by his shiny electric gate, looking calm as always. He turned to the crowd of neighbors who were now spilling out onto the sidewalk, whispering and pointing. "Listen up, everyone," Jake said, his voice clear and strong. "The HOA is getting a full checkup. That means they're going to look at all the money and make sure it's where it should be. No more fake fines, no more bullying. Things are going to change